بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. سهل لنا أمورنا واشرح لنا صدورنا ووفقنا لما تحبه وترضاه. So in the first meeting last Thursday we just covered introductory points, and today we are going to continue with the first perspective, I mean Mu'tazila perspective. But before that, I have some points just to follow up with the last meeting. So I just mentioned in the last meeting an exhibition by Ibn Hajar when he judged on some hadith. He said رجاله رجال الصحيح, and just I want to correct that it's not Ibn Hajar, is al-Haythami, Nuruddin al-Haythami, in his book Majma' al-Zawaid, and also I would thank Sidi Bilal for correcting me on Ibn Adi. So this is what I have, Dar al-Kutub al-Ilmiya. So always ulama and طلاب العلم criticize Dar al-Kutub al-Ilmiya for a lot of mistakes. And it seems that's also my mistake, because maybe I have an excuse for this. My whole library burned in Syria during the war, so I mostly I rely on some books like this, or I found on as a PDF. So, and in this book, after just like when I read the introduction, he confirms that is Ibn Uday. But then just I checked, and that's not Ibn Uday. So Ibn Adi, just to follow. And these very important to know the names of authors and narrators. And the last point, I mentioned متقدمين and متأخرين. That mean early scholars and late scholars. So there are a couple of opinions who are early and late scholars. In my book, I mentioned before the origin of ilm al-Hadith and the dividing line between early and late. I presented 6 opinions. One of them is the end of Mutaqaddimin in the end of the 3rd Islamic century. And that's based on al-Dhahabi in his book Mizan al-I'tidal, and his perspective based on the idea of Jarh and Ta'dil and Ruwat. So when the age of narrators done, that in the first 3 Islamic centuries, this is the age of Mutaqaddimin in terms of hadith and or terminology. So, but however, that doesn't mean anyone after the 3rd Islamic century is not among Mutaqaddimin. So we can see in the 1st Islamic century, there are a couple of muhaddithin like al-Daraqutni, Ibn Hibban, al-Khattabi. So all of these relied on the same asanid in the 3rd Islamic century, mustakhrajat. So we consider them just like an extended, the 4th century is an extended century added to the first 3 Islamic centuries. But then extend that to the time of Khatib al-Baghdadi, or in the end, the 5th Islamic century. That, I think, I cannot accept that Mutaqaddimin in the 5th Islamic century. I speak here specifically about hadith. And hadith in riwayah and dirayah. I don't speak about other ulum. This need a research to define where is متقدمين and متأخرين, أصول الكلام and أصول الدين, أصول الفقه, and all of these books. But in this, I am interested to know when like people said munkar and munkar عند المتقدمين, what does that mean? So how I can know متقدمين where and or متأخرين. This is like very important in this ilm because Muṣṭalaḥ, the idea of Muṣṭalaḥ, you cannot give just a concept or a term without a context. So, and always here at Darul Qasim, when any question on Muṣṭalaḥ, I follow any question with 3 questions: when, who, and how. So we need to ask 3 questions when we encounter with any term: who said that, and in which era, and when, and how. So just like to know. And these questions explain a lot of us to us and can give some information about this mustalah. In any book, Shama'il, Sahih al-Bukhari, in any book, we should ask all of these questions when encounter with any term. So on Mu'tazila approach, some scholarly and references works. So I'll start with al-Shafi'i Jima' al-Ilm. This like to see Mu'tazila from like external viewpoint, not from their books, from a Shafi'i perspective. And the second one, Dirar bin Amr, his book At-Tahrish. There are a lot of scholars argue this not a book by Dirar bin Amr, but in the end edited by Dirar bin Amr. I just published maybe 3 years ago by a Turkish scholar, also Hussein Khanso in Turkey. And in Tahrish is not a Mu'tazili book, but just a book to present all firaq in the second Islamic century and their opinions on different approaches. And he includes Mu'tazila and others in his book. All al-Jahiz works, and then Abu al-Husayn al-Khayyat in his book Al-Intisar. This book came as a refute to Ibn Rawandi in his book Fadihatul Mu'tazila. So Ibn Rawandi wrote Fadihatul Mu'tazila, and I think Fadihatul Mu'tazila is a refute to a book by Al-Jahiz, Fadilatul I'tizal or Fadilatul Mu'tazila. So Al-Jahiz wrote Fadilatul Mu'tazila, and Rawandi wrote Fadihatul Mu'tazila, and then Al-Intisar wrote another book, Al-Intisar, that's mean intisar, supporting I'tizal. So the idea of Al-Khayyat is just to reject Khabar al-Wahid in this book. So he said that in the beginning, the one purpose of the book is to reject Khabar al-Wahid, and that made his student Abu al-Qasim al-Balkhi to write a book just to say we are not rejecting Khabar al-Wahid, we are in the middle. And he said, I write a book called Qabul al-Akhbar wa Ma'rifatul Rijal, just to say we have some like criteria on this, and he presented his criterion in the introduction of his book Qabul al-Akhbar wa Ma'rifatul Rijal. And I'll return back to this book Qabul al-Akhbar wa Ma'rifatul Rijal, and another book Maqalatul Islamiyyin. So in this book he talks very little about his viewpoint on hadith criticism, mostly Maqalat al-Islamiyyin, to mention where Mu'tazila spread in the Islamic world, Bilad al-Sham and East and West. And then a book by Al-Qadi Abdul Jabbar in 2 books. The first one, Fadl al-I'tizal wa Tabaqat al-Mu'tazila. I consider this book the main book to know Mu'tazila approach on hadith criticism. He just put Tabaqat or al-Mu'tazila in 10 tabaqat, 10 tabaqas, 10 generations. And then another Mu'tazili scholar came in the later, after 1 century, Al-Hakim al-Jushami, in his book, the Sharh al-Uyun. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. This H, not SG, شرح العيون, and added 2 طبقات to القاضي عبد الجبار, and then طبقات المعتزلة تلا الحاكم الجشمي, that's 12 طبقات. So however, they started the first طبقة from Sahaba, and some of them just go beyond that and consider the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the first طبقة of اعتزال, who like in hadith and everything, who presented اعتزال. So however, you can see many weird things on all of these طبقات. And another book by Qadi Abdul Jabbar, Al-Mughni fi Abwab al-Adli wa Tawheed, is a very big book, I think 15 or 16, 16 volumes. You can see kalam and talk on hadith criticism in many places in this book. And I recommend this article by Rasha Al-Umari, is I think from Princeton University. She wrote an article, the title, Accommodation and Resistance, Classical Mu'tazilite on Hadith. And also I think her dissertation on theological concept or the theology of al-Qasim al-Balkhi, mostly her work on Abi al-Qasim al-Balkhi. And also I wrote an article, still unpublished. I presented this article at American Oriental Society on the Mu'tazilite approach towards the Hadith criticism, the origin and evolution. And I'm working right now on a book about this Mu'tazila approach towards the Hadith criticism, the origin and evolution. So 2 edition of Qabul al-Akhbar, and here but Qabul, and my perspective on Qabul should be Qabul. This a discussion just like happened here in Dar al-Qasim 2 days ago about Qabul or Qabul. So I hope that Allah yunir basirati to see Qabul. Dr. Shukri said Qabul is we have two ways, like wudu and Qabul and Qabul. But I've heard from like ulama is not like based on lexicon, that Qabul is the word, but Qabul is used for a different meaning. However, so this book, Qabul al-Akhbar, based on al-Hikaya, edited by someone like ignores everything like about this book. He just edited a book without any knowledge. He just like came to this book, that's a book of hadith. And al-Balkhi like narrated everything with isnad, and then in the end, after isnad, that's to criticize Ahl Sunnah. And then this editor, what's happening here? It seems that like the author has like some problem, and and he writes something in Hashia, and then the second page and the third page, and then he starts to say A'azan Allah, Ma'az Allah, and like all of these. It seems like ignoring what's the purpose of this book. But and we have this another one. Hussein Khanso is the one who is also focusing on Mu'tazila and the idea of tawatur, the origin of tawatur, and also the person who edited the Tahrish. So in kutub, in books of Jarh and Ta'dil and Rijal, we don't see Mu'tazila. People, scholars did not accuse like some narrators with Mu'tazili. They said Qadari. So they don't say Mu'tazili. That's very rare. So mostly they refer to Mu'tazila as Qadari. So that's in Fadl al-I'tizal, just a very important citation to say that Qadariyya is an accusation for Ahl Sunnah or for Jabriya in the 1st century. And then Jabriya turns the table to accuse by Qadariyya al-Mu'tazila. And then this is a very confusing term between the 1st Islamic century and the 2nd Islamic century. Who is Qadariyya in the 1st Islamic century and who is Qadariyya in the second Islamic century. So ذكر عثمان الطويل, this is from فضل الاعتزال, قال كنا مرة في منزل عبد الوهاب بن عبد الحميد فتذاكرنا القدر فقال عبد الوهاب كنا عند سليمان التيمي فذكرنا القدر فقال هل علينا عين. This citation to speak from Mu'tazila to speak about Jabriya. So here Abdul Wahhab and Sulaiman are from another camp, Jabriya. And Sulaiman Taymi said, هل علينا عين? Anyone like seeing us? Is there any spy? Can we talk without any eye? Like, and then قالوا لا, no one. And he said, اعلموا أن كنا نسمى قدرية. Like people named us as Qadariyya. فقلبناها عليهم. And then we turned the table. وأعاننا السلطان على ذلك. And Sultan just helped us to do that. فانقلبت فسمونا بما هو أقبح من ذلك المجبرة. And then they called us مجبرة. And that's like worse than Qadariyya. So I found this a very unique citation, like just like to speak about this accusation Qadariyya in the first Islamic century and the second Islamic century, and how Mu'tazila accused by Qadariyya. However, I think al-Qadariyya majusu ahli hadhihi al-ummah, there are discussion about the isnad, but I think this matin and this hadith is accepted because all of them agreed on this hadith. And just like they don't want like to be accused by Qadariyya. So from all camps. So here, so how we can approach Mu'tazila? So there are two images of I'tizal or Mu'tazila. The first one what we find in Ahl Sunnah books, and the second one in their own books. So in Ahl Sunnah books, so we don't find, as I said in the first meeting, so we don't find late works to include anything outside of Shafi'i, Ash'ari. So mostly what we have with the majority, not from Hanafi and not from Mu'tazili, and very like just to mention this, the nature of I'tizal or the methodology of I'tizal, approach of I'tizal, but not to include them. Just in very few places to refute and to argue against them. So the image of Mu'tazila in Ahl Sunnah books, the people who stipulate one criterion to accept hadith. And this one is a number of narrators, is to stipulate 2 narrators for 10 I don't know if they mentioned 10, 12, 40, and 70, and different numbers. But in their own books, we can see that's not true. Maybe this just like some opinions in their books, but that's not just like their approach based on the number of narrators. So here a discussion that always I'm thinking so about the early and late time. So in early time of scholars just like discussed about what the approach was, the criterion that we rely to accept and verify hadith. Is a number or fiqh or adala? So it seems that for muhaddithin from like the first century, is adala is the entrance, the main gate to accept hadith. And number is raised by Mu'tazila and the second Islamic century based on some transmissions and reports with Sahaba, that Abu Bakr asked another witness or another narrator, and also Ali bin Abi Talib and other Sahaba asked another narrator to accept hadith. Based on this, some ulama said we need 2 narrators. And this, like in late discussion, that's just like for unique cases, that not the idea and the general approach in the with Sahaba. And for Fiqh, who will speak about that later with Hanafi approach, so there are some misconception. Is a Fiqh like the main criterion for Hanafi to accept any hadith? So did they stipulate that Rawi, narrator, should be faqih to accept his hadith? So we will speak about that later in the early and late Hanafi works. So however, in the first 3 Islamic centuries, there are 3 criteria discussed: number of narrators, fiqh, and adala. But after the first 3 Islamic centuries, one of these just went, is adala. So we don't see just number referring to i'tizal and fiqh referring to Hanafi. But however, still number, the idea of number is a confusing issue. As we will see later, al-Hakim al-Naysaburi in his Madkhal said that the shart of Sahih, criterion of Sahihain, is to have for each narrator 2 narrators. And we will talk about this later. So a number of narrators. So we will see different Islamic schools, especially in Mu'tazila, who stipulated like we need 2 narrators to accept Khabar al-Wahid. And that referred in the late Sunni works to Ibn Ulayya, especially in Tadrib al-Rawi. And they call this Mazhab al-Mu'tazila, is to consider or they accept hadith based on Aziz. The idea of Aziz is different, not like 2 ahad. The idea of Aziz is, I don't know what the math term for this. If we have in the first 2 narrators, the second 4, and then 8, 16, and 32. What's that in math? Again? Exponential growth. I cannot say that. Can you use or say,
exponential.
That's this. Okay. So we call this and there is another, like Khabar al-Wahid is like 2, 4, 6, 8. Like we have this like two ways of this in math. So Mu'tazila thinking about Ithnain is based on this term. So Al-Hakim, understanding as-Sahihain, he said we need for each, not we need, as he understood Sahihain nature, he said that for each narrator there are 2 narrators. All scholars after Al-Hakim rejected his understanding, and they said, so to understand what Al-Hakim said, we have 2 pictures, 2 images. The first one, 2 narrators for this narrator in this hadith, and that's mean Aziz. Or we have 2 narrators for a narrator in general. That's just to remove the accusation of jahala. So based on 2 images, nothing happened in Sahihain. Not the first one and not the second one. That's what Ibn Hajar in Fath al-Bari, he followed like 2 images, and he found that we have some narrators in Bukhari, just we have 1 narrator in general. So not in this hadith, in general, just like 1 narrator. So however, Al-Hakim understanding just rejected from late scholars. And also I mentioned before that some said we need 4 narrators to accept hadith, and some said 20. That's Huzayl Allaf from Mu'tazila said that. And also An-Nazam Nazam said mutawatir, just accepted. And then Ibn Qutayba, in his book Ta'wil Mukhtalaf al-Hadith, just argued against all of these approaches that's based on numbers. He said, قال ابن قتيبة في كتابه تأويل مختلف الحديث: ولو قال قائل إن الخبر لا يثبت إلا بثمانية، لقول الله تعالى في أصحاب الكهف: وهم الحجة على أهل ذلك الزمان 7 وثامنهم كلبهم، ولا يجوز أن يكون 8 حتى يكون الكلب ثامنهم، لكان أيضا قولا وعددا مستخرجا من القرآن. So just, and he didn't add anything. This is his refutation. So if that's based on numbers on Quran, so let us say we need 8 narrators and one of them should be a dog. And he didn't add anything to that. So he said that just like to reject all approaches based on numbers. So what's the idea of number? What's the significance of number? And this very, I think, important. And then you know, after that, in late Usuli works, al-adad la mafhuma lahu. So we cannot rely on adad, because adad we don't know why this adad, mostly ta'abbudi, or especially in shahada, like 4, we don't know why 4. So just like follow the order of Sharia. So in Mu'tazila evolution, we can see I divided the Mu'tazila history into three ages. The first one early, late, and contemporary. In the early, so we can see Mu'tazila known as Ahlul Adli wa Tawheed, the people of justice and oneness, because of 2 famous principles, al-Adl wa al-Tawheed. And then later, 3 principles added to the first 2 and became 5: al-Adl, al-Tawheed, al-Amr bil-Ma'ruf wal-Nahy عن المنكر, المنزلة بين المنزلتين, والوعد والوعيد. But before this, al-Manzila بين المنزلتين was before all of these. This is the original principle that started in the circle of al-Hasan al-Basri. In al-Hasan al-Basri circles, al-Hasan al-Basri believes that people of just like divided in 2 major categories. The first one, believers, mu'minun, and disbelievers, unbelievers, kafirun, and munafiqun, hypocrites. And then Wasil bin Ata came with this rank between mu'min and kafir, who is fasiq. So how we translate fasiq? Wrongdoers or grave sinners. So this manzila bayn al-manzilatayn, between iman and kufr, and from here i'tizal started from Wasil bin Ata to add this principle, manzila bayn al-manzilatayn, and the rank of fisq. So this is the original principle in Mu'tazila, but then they were known for their famous principles, al-adl wa tawheed, and called ahlul adli wa tawheed. In the early i'tizal, and especially in the circle of Hasan al-Basri, there are some famous scholars like Amr bin Ubayd al-Basri, Wasil bin Ata, and Qatada bin Da'ama al-Sadusi, the one who muhaddithin rely on him in al-Kutub al-Sitta. And Amr bin Ubayd al-Basri said something like very unique based on i'tizal. He said, if anyone just tell us this a verse from Quran and this verse contradict with our principles, we said, not on this verse we believed. So we have a different way to believe. This is not the way that he said, ليس على هذا أخذ الله علينا العهد. So this is not our, like, the covenant between Allah and between us. And if the Prophet said to us this hadith and contradict with our doctrine, and we said, لَيْسَ عَلَى هَذَا أَسْلَمْنَا, we not become Muslims because of this. And if Sulaiman al-A'mash, like just a narrator from the second Islamic century, narrated to us this hadith and we said he kazzab, that's just like a human. So then the idea for Amr bin Ubayd al-Basri is there, we back to the idea of tahsin and taqbih. There are some principles ruling everything in Quran and Sunnah. And we'll see that later. So for late era, we see al-Balkhi in his book Qabul al-Akhbar and Abu al-Husayn al-Basri. So al-Balkhi is in the middle, the one who wrote Qabul al-Akhbar with Asanid, and he, it seems like, presented that hadith is authentic and we can rely on hadith, but in the end, the book just to reject Sunnah. Abu al-Husayn al-Basri in al-Mu'tamad, we can see in the late, that in the 5th Islamic century, this book was a source for the majority of Ahl al-Sunnah in al-Mustasfa and al-Mahsul. So we can see al-Mu'tazila just left their doctrine, especially in Usul al-Fiqh. We speak about Usul al-Fiqh and interpretation, hermeneutics, and all of these, and be close to Jumhur. And then no one mentioned i'tizal, just done with i'tizal. But we have in our contemporary time what we call new i'tizal or new Mu'tazila. So what's the idea of i'tizal? And especially when I don't know if we can talk about this here in the Western world, but in Arab world, this term coming like, it seems like obvious, like to depict some thinkers, scholars, and Qur'aniyin. So the idea of i'tizal here is not just about kalam, it's not about 5 principles. It's just about which one is ruling, reasoning or tradition. So when you put or reasoning over tradition, that's mean on i'tizal. And that's like, if you go this like to extremist way, that's like you are very heavy Mu'tazili. So when you speak about Mu'tazila, here is epistemology and testimonial knowledge, the idea of certainty and yaqeen, and the idea of reasoning over tradition. This is the idea of i'tizal, and we will see that among Qur'aniyin, the one who is rejecting Sunnah. So 2 strategies for Mu'tazila on Hadith criticism. The first one, deconstruction of Ahl al-Hadith methodology, and the second one, introducing their epistemological perspective. So in the first one, deconstruction or deconstruction of Ahl al-Hadith methodology, that's what we find on Abil Qasim al-Balkhi al-Ka'bi from the 4th Islamic century in his book Qabul al-Akhbar wa Ma'rifatu al-Rijal. So in his book, 12 chapters, just the purpose of these chapters to undermine Ahl al-Hadith criteria. And he followed Ahl al-Hadith style isnad. So nothing in this book without isnad, as I said. So everything with isnad, hadathana, and in the end, to undermine Ahl al-Hadith criteria. The explicit purpose to educate his readers the critical method of verifying hadith through knowing the origin of hadith and its source. What he said, al-Hadith asluhu wa makhrajuhu. The implicit purpose after reading the 12 chapters is to make all readers doubt hadith, therefore rejecting it as a source of knowledge. So here, just like we see a summary of al-Balkhi approach, so through these 12 chapters. So he cited a couple of reports from prominent Sunni hadith scholars with isnad, state that only a third of hadith can be verified. And this we see like this mostly Orientalists rely on this book for revisionists and for just to deny Sunnah and to yeah. So and also state that just 20 narrators can be considered reliable. And hadith was not heard directly from the Prophet, rejects the woman's transmission. So we see this, that's just like in Mu'tazila approach. So Jumhur, they did not reject woman transmission. And a colleague of mine, Asma Sayyid from UCLA, wrote a very important book on the woman and transmission, woman and hadith. And she wrote, I think, a very good work on the transmission of women in the history of Islam. And also the fear among narrators of narrating hadith or seeking hadith, labeling the people of hadith, ashab al-hadith, as wrongdoers, fusaq, or evil, shirarun nas, foolish, safi. This is based on Ahl Sunnah transmissions. So he brings that to his book just to see, to show the reader that's Ahl al-Hadith, like how they accuse each other. And the narrating hadith leads to bad behaviors, laxity in acts of worship, and preventing people from remembering Allah and prayer. So narrating hadith makes people futur عن العبادة, الصدع عن ذكر الله, وعن الصلاة. And also state that in his book, rejecting any hadith that contradicts with the Quran, Sunnah reasoning, praxis, amal, and haq, truth. How muhaddithin narrated silly, sakhif reports that contradicts with the history or the practice of ummah. Indicate instability and chaos in the jarh and ta'dil. So, however, a lot of reports in Qabul al-Akhbar we find later in Khatib al-Baghdadi's al-Jami' li-Akhlaq al-Rawi wa Adab al-Sami', but different versions. In Qabul al-Akhbar we see a bad picture, different tunes. But then when we go to Jami' li-Akhlaq al-Rawi, we see the same story but different image. So Shu'bah there, yes, was poor and seeking for money. But then here, poor but zahid. Do you see like two images? See same stories, same accounts here and there, but different image. And you can follow and you can see same isnad. And I think this needs a research and work to compare between Qabul al-Akhbar and al-Jami' li-Akhlaq al-Rawi wa Adab al-Sami'. So then the major part of the book is dedicated to the reality of muhaddithin, probity, al-adala. In this part, al-Balkhi presents a narrative opposed completely to what we find in the Sunni tabaqat literature, I mean Jami' li-Akhlaq al-Rawi wa Adab al-Sami'. So how we can understand Mu'tazila approach? So there are two ways, nazar and amal. So, but I borrowed here two terms from Aaron Zaiso in his book, The Economy of Certainty. He used these terms, reconstructed authenticity and authenticity in use. That's mean like nazar and amal. And also these terms he borrowed from another one working in the legal field, that's reconstructed, in logic, reconstructed logic and logic in use. So, however, this book is very important, and just Aaron Zaiso wrote this book, and Sheikh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudde said, "Ikhsha min sahib al-kitab al-wahid." So fear and be afraid of the one who wrote just like one book. And this book is very good by Aaron Zaiso, who covered Hanafi, Zahiri, and Mu'tazili based on the idea of certainty. So I'll start what I mean by just like reconstructed authenticity, another. So how Mu'tazila presented their approach in their books, their methodology on hadith. So what's their theory? And then amal, how they rely on hadith. When they cited hadith, what's their criteria? So I find like two things. So they presented theoretical approach, and then they cited some hadith, and we can see from these hadiths, so what their criteria. So on reconstructed authenticity, Abdul Jabbar, this is the first citation by Wasil ibn Ata, and Abdul Jabbar in his book Fadl al-I'tizal cited this. I read first in Arabic. كل خبر لا يمكن فيه التواطؤ والتراسل والاتفاق على غير التواطؤ فهو حجة. الحق لا يعرف إلا بكتاب الله الذي لا يحتمل التأويل وبخبر جاء مجيء الحجة وبعقل سليم. This is the first citation from Wasil ibn Ata in the second Islamic century. How to accept hadith. And this is a translation of English. Maybe you can translate better than me. But the idea in the end, so what the reports that we can accept? Three types of reports. The first one, Kitabullah, الذي لا يحتمل التأويل, verses from Quran that just has one meaning, no room for interpretation. And the second one, خبر جاء مجيء الحجة, not any report. A report was like in the shape of evidence. And the third one, عقل سليم, sound reasoning. These are three types of reports in the third Islamic century that Wasil ibn Ata rely on. So then, just one century later, Hussein al-Khayyat added another source, is al-Ijma', consensus. So he says, hearing are three. للسمع ثلاث طرق. Quran, that's what we have in Wasil ibn Ata, كتاب الله الذي لا يحتمل التأويل. And we have a new one, consensus here, al-Ijma', and reports that yield certainty. But here he didn't mention al-Aql al-Salim. But we will find that later with al-Balkhi. Al-Balkhi refines the criterion and combine everything here. In his Qabul al-Akhbar, in the introduction, he said, فَتَجِدُهُ, تَجِدُهُ referring to report, like you should find hadith, غَيْرَ مُخَالِفٍ لِكِتَابِ اللَّهِ, the first one, hadith shouldn't or should agree or conform with كتاب الله, not contradict with كتاب الله, الذي لا يأتيه الباطل من بين يديه ولا من خلفه, ولسنة رسول الله المجمع عليها. So not any sunnah, not any tradition should be concurrent, يعني sunnah. ولإجماع الأمة, so here's a consensus of ummah, and عمل الصدر الأول, the practice of the first generation, that means Sahaba, and then al-Aql. So we see here Kitabullah, al-Sunnah, al-Ijma' and al-Aql. So mentioned in al-Intisar by al-Khayyat and al-Wasil ibn Ata. But we have another resource here. Which one? So al-Balkhi here added another one. Like we have five. Kitabullah, Sunnatu Rasulillah, Ijma' al-Ummah, Amal al-Sadr al-Awwal, al-Aql. So that's Amal al-Sadr al-Awwal. So he added Amal al-Sadr al-Awwal. But then he said, ليس كالتوحيد والعدل. Here, a very important addition. ليس كالتوحيد والعدل. But as for Adil and Tawheed, the divine justice and oneness, is something else. اللذين لا يجوز أن يتغير الحكم فيهما في حال من الأحوال ولا على لسان رسول من الرسل ولا بقول أحد من السلف ولا بوجه من الوجوه ولا بسبب من الأسباب وأنهما إذا كانا كذلك لم يكن للإخبار فيهما أكثر من تأكيد ما يوجبه العقل. So we rely on 5 resources, but as for adala and tawheed, so all of these resources just coming to confirm the idea of adala or tawheed. But and if we find anything contradict with the idea of adala or tawheed, we reject all of these. Why? Because adala and tawheed are universal principles. So no prophet, no one can disagree or reject all these 2 principles. These 2 universal and human principles. So al-Balkhi is this, the same one, just like in English, what I wrote before. So he said in his introduction, we have 3 steps. The first step that a scholar should take in account is to be inherently distrustful of reports. تقديم سوء الظن. This is the first one. When you just like coming to hadith, the first one you should start with سوء الظن. And the second step is if the hadith doesn't oppose the following 5 resources I just mentioned: Quran, concordant, Sunnah, consensus of the Muslim community, Ummah, praxis of the first generation, as-Sadr al-Awwal, and the reasoning that Allah made it to be His evidence on His slaves. The third step, as I said, the hadith should agree with the 2 principles: oneness, tawheed, and divine justice, for they cannot be changed over the time or by any prophet, anyone from the ancestor, and any or by any interpretation or reason. So, do you have any question so far? Yes.
Is al-Balkhi not interested in isnad at all? These are the only criteria by which he's willing to accept a hadith as
it seems so. So al-Balkhi has a lot of works, and I don't know what's coming with al-Balkhi with his manuscripts, but so far we have Qabul al-Akhbar and Maqalat al-Islamiyyin in the volume with under the title Fadl al-I'tizal. 3 works under this title: Maqalat al-Islamiyyin and Fadl al-I'tizal and Tabaqat and Sharh al-Uyun lil-Hakim al-Jushami. So in all of these works, we don't find al-Balkhi presented his approach based on isnad. But who is the one who narrated everything with isnad? This is the dilemma, or just like maybe made this as a tool to reject hadith. So we have isnad. But I said that in our classes here at Dar al-Qasim, when we see others, so because mostly in the first Islamic century, we see isnad as a privilege of Ahl al-Hadith. And then this the idea of isnad spread among linguistics and all people of language. They narrated everything with isnad. And then it happened like also the people telling jokes with isnad in the first 3 Islamic centuries. But then we find al-Balkhi in the 4th Islamic century reject hadith based on isnad. And then later among, and I mentioned that in our classes, that Moses bin Maymun, Maimonides also rely on isnad in Mishnah and based on Aziz, Khabar al-Aziz. And I said that the idea, just like telling us that isnad was successful tool in the history of Islam. And we should think about this, like how isnad circulated in the history of Islam inside the Muslim community and outside the Muslim community. Any question from the people? Yeah.
First step says that a scholar should be, or he should have a
Yeah.
So, if a scholar from the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, if they hear a narration or if someone is quoting a narration, especially in these days where people they quote all things and they say that the Prophet ﷺ, he said this, and it does not sound Islamic, it does not sound
Right.
on the nature of the Prophet. So is having su'ul dhan at that time, is that also like a Mu'tazili symptom?
No, but if you recall what we read at Injassas, فليحذر الذين يخالفون and لعلهم يحذرون. So the Khasam of Hanafi in this book, they said this ayah, this verse, لعلهم فلولا نفر من كل فرقة منهم طائفة لعلهم يحذرون, the ayah telling us to be warning against any khabar can establish a new thing not from Islam. So their methodology is, yes, we need like to be cautious and towards any hadith can establish anything not like belong to this message. So maybe this their approach, and that's what we found in al-Jassas. I don't hear like أقدم حسن الظن towards them, but I think this the way how we can understand تقديم سوء الظن. The idea is not to make the text is very limited, and we need to know what's the text that we can rely on, and not to bring to Islam anything maybe could be not fit with the message and or fabricated or all of these. This is the idea of تقديم سوء الظن. And we need to say that in طبقات معتزلة and also in Sunni works, a lot of معتزلة كانوا عبادا زهادا, worshippers. So when we speak about the Ibn Ata, al-Hasan al-Basri circles, so you can see like the people like just like قوام في الليل قوام في النهار صوام في النهار. And one of them, they have a strategy like by Wasil bin Ata when he sent, I don't know if I can recall the name, when he sent his student to Khurasan, and this a strategy and telling us a trick by Wasil bin Ata. He said to him, go to there and just stay in one place and stuck with one place in the mosque and pray for 1 year and don't talk anything. And then after 1 year spread i'tizal. That's in al-Balkhi. So they understand the idea of adala, that Muslim rely on adala and this. But I cannot say, but he understands that Muslim just rely on like the shape and adala and the mazhar, and after this they accept anything. And it seems this like strategy still works in Muslim community. I believe this like Wasim Ata, he understands Muslim community very well, because still this you can see many people deceived by the shape. The nature of accepted hadith according to Mu'tazila, he said we have 3 types of akhbar, or 3 types of subjects. The first one, he said أصول الكلام المجتمع عليها, الأمر العام, and فروع. So أصول, the principles of kalam, and الأمر العام, here you can see أصول الكلام, theological principles, the major theological principles, and الأمر العام, the public matter, the public sphere, and then فروع, positive law. 3 subjects. For each one, we have a criterion. For أصول الكلام we need متواتر. For أصول الكلام we need متواتر. For الأمر العام we need خبر الجماعة وعمل الأمة. So that's different from تواتر. خبر الجماعة is different from تواتر. And you know, like in جماع العلم and الرسالة, الشافعي presented two terms, خبر العامة and خبر الخاصة. So in the first three Islamic centuries, now we have خبر المتواتر, خبر الجماعة, خبر العامة, and خبر الخاصة. So for الأمر العام, we need خبر الجماعة and عمل الأمة. And for فروع, so we accept خبر الاثنين. That means عزيز or ثلاثة, that means مشهور. So ثلاثة means in the second, like 9, and then 27, in this way. But for for فروع, also we cannot accept any فرع فقهي contradicts with the 5 principles. So here's a second way for just like to see how I'tizal applied their methodologies. So based on reports that they presented, we find 4 categories. Mutawatir reports including the Quran that match their doctrine. Mutawatir reports including the Quran that contradict with their doctrine. Other reports including Aziz, Wahid that match their doctrine. Other reports including Aziz and Wahid that contradict with their doctrine. So the first and third category approved, because the idea for these akhbar just to confirm 5 principles or the 2 major principles. And reports don't follow these criterion approved. That should be a mistake here, right? I think I mentioned this as a mistake. Reports don't follow these criteria approved, I think should be rejected. Or maybe to be more accurate, not rejected, should be interpreted to be to agree with their principles. So then anything agree with their principles approved, and anything that don't match with their principles should be interpreted and just to consider among the akhbar that rely on. So here we can see the bias of I'tizal in their books. The akhbar that not mutawatir and no isnad or just forged, and they rely on these akhbar without any, but just because these akhbar agree and support their doctrine. The first one, no isnad, just mentions this. Ubay ibn Ka'b, that the Prophet says, "Ash-shaqiyyu man shaqiya bi'amalihi was-sa'idu man sa'ida bi'amalihi." Why they approve this? Because amal, the action of humans, this is their al-insanu yakhluqu af'ala nafsihi, because the idea of amal is the idea of judgment. And also Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman, they narrated this, and this mawdu', I'm sorry, not mawdu', this one. Just let me check. من اعتزل الشر سقط في الخير. We don't see this hadith in any book. But why? Because to praise اعتزال, من اعتزل, the idea of اعتزال. And this under the title في مديح المعتزلة. And this the report coming supporting to support الاعتزال. But then the third one, سيكون من أمتي رجل يقال له واصل يفصل بين الحق والباطل. So واصل here referring to واصل bin Ata. So here, and we don't see any isnad, and just like asanid, and they rely on hadith that confirm their doctrine. For the second and fourth category, that's here, the second that contradict, and fourth that contradict, mutawatir or aziz and wahid. The second category interpreted in the way it fits their doctrine. Fourth category, Mu'tazila presented a couple of reasons that don't allow them to rely on such these reports. The major reason is that the theological matters require certainty that cannot be based on khabar al-wahid. So the irony here, and this is a text from Fadl al-I'tizal, we will read it later in Arabic, but here's in English. In a very clear example, Abu Ali al-Jubbai accepts khabar al-wahid and reject another one which both have same isnad. The isnad is Abu Zinad an al-A'raj an Abi Huraira. His criterion for acceptance is the hadith conforms with consensus, and for rejecting is the hadith contradicts with the Quran, consensus and reasoning. So we read here the Arabic version. This long, but I just put what we need. أنه ناظر له أبا علي فخصمه. أنه referring to one is a Turkani in the second line. So التركاني ناظر له أبا علي فخصمه. الخصم يعني أبو علي الجبائي winning over التركاني. قال فلما صرت إلى أبي علي سألته عن ذلك فقال التركاني. That doesn't important to know about that, but just like we have أبو علي الجبائي and another one. فقال التركاني كان عندي في منزلي ها هنا ونحن على الطعام. فقال يا أبا علي, the one who asking أبو علي, ما تقول في حديث أبي الزناد؟ فقلت هو صحيح. The editor said this hadith from أبي الزناد عن الأعرج أبي هريرة, the hadith تنكح المرأة على عمتها وخالتها, it's just for فروع. And he said صحيح. قال فبهذا الإسناد, in the same إسناد, حديث حج آدم موسى. قلت هذا باطل. قال حديثان بإسناد واحد. So two hadith and same إسناد. صححت أحدهما وأبطلت الآخر. One verified and said sound, and the second one you said is weak or just باطل. فقلت ما صححت هذا لإسناده وأبطلت ذلك لإسناده. Is not the idea, is not my perspective is إسناد. إسناد is not my area, so I don't want to look at إسناد. The idea of متن. وإنما صححت هذا لوقوع الإجماع عليه, because the first one just Muslim agreed, and the mean Muslim agreed here فقهاء, because the idea of لا تنكح المرأة على عمتها وخالتها. وإنما أبو هريرة رجل من المسلمين. So I don't give any care to any narrator, even though أبو هريرة رجل من المسلمين, a man among Muslim community. وأبطلت ذلك لأن القرآن يدل على بطلانه. And just I said that weak or fake because Quran indicates this like fake or not accepted. وإجماع المسلمين ودليل العقل. كيف ذلك? So the idea here, حج آدم موسى, is just about the idea of qadar, because the hadith doesn't fit with the idea of qadar and with the same isnad. So after this, so we can see, just to summarize, the isnad is not the criterion or the entrance for Mu'tazila. And then, so just like a question for everyone here, so based on this text, can we say right now if we have 2 narrators or 4 narrators, 10 narrators or 70 narrators, all of these, like can we say Mu'tazila accept any khabar or any transmission with like a big number of narrators? Definitely no. The idea of not is not the number of narrators. The idea of the counting, matan. So if the matan confirm and support their doctrine, accepted. And if the matan disagree or contradict their doctrine, will not be accepted. And then everything in Quran, Sunnah Mutawatira, just to confirm the main 2 principles, al-adl and al-tawheed. And this is what we find clearly in قبول الأخبار ومعرفة الرجال. It's very short introduction, but it's very important. They said العدل والتوحيد is beyond all of these 5 resources. So all resources just like coming and all of these texts coming to confirm and to support these 2 major principles. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. So we have 5 minutes, 7 minutes for questions. تفضل.
I just have one comment. I agree. From what you presented, it's obvious that they reject transmissions which
I'm sorry.
it's obvious from what you have shown us that they reject transmissions that go against their doctrines.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem that, that's their only criteria. Because, for example, here, marrying a woman and her aunt together, that's not a typically Mu'tazila criteria. That's
Yeah, right.
so that's I think it's we can say.
And he said before that in قبول الأخبار that in أخبار الفروع, the positive law and fiqh, we accept أخبار if these أخبار agreed with the 5 principles or 2 principles. So here for this case, marriage, nothing with their doctrine, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems it's more like a negative criteria.
Yeah.
Meaning like they just reject those that go against their doctrine, but
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that they accept only transmissions that
Right.
that are according to the 5 principles.
Right. Thank you. If anyone coming, ask. Yeah, there is a question from the lady side.
With regard to their being critical of narrations that are not in agreement with their foundational principles, do they consider then that their foundational principles are based on the highest strength of textual evidence? So therefore they think that they're doing a comparison analogous to the fuqaha of Ahlus Sunnah, for example, when they don't accept a text of lower strength to modify or to contradict a text of higher strength? Or is it just very arbitrary?
So maybe I didn't follow you. If my answer doesn't match your question, just let me know. So I understood from your question that it's just like their approach is textual or based on reasoning. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it could be construed that I'm asking, are their foundational principles in their estimation only aqli based, or are they so strongly textually based that they consider that it justifiable to reject other texts that don't follow their principles?
So based on their text, I found that the 2 major principles, specifically here, adl wa tawheed, is beyond textual evidence. So they don't rely on everything with text just to support these 2 principles, adl and tawheed. But if we go early to manzila bayn al-manzilatayn, it's not coming from like just based on reasoning. So for manzila and manzilatayn, they rely on text. And same for al-amr bil-ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar, commanding right and forbidding wrong, and also al-wa'd wal-wa'id. So the 3 principles completely they rely on text. And this is what I found in use, like in theory and in their citations, hadith and Quran. But the 2 major principles, and that's very clear in قبول الأخبار, it seems very clear in theory and theoretical and practical work, they reject any hadith and maybe interpret Quran to fit with their doctrine, and anything coming from text just to confirm and to support their doctrines. So then these doctrines, as we clearly found in al-Balkhi, he said again, ليس كالتوحيد والعدل, in the last four lines. وليس كالتوحيد والعدل اللذين لا يجوز أن يتغير الحكم فيهما في حال من الأحوال ولا على لسان رسول من الرسل. So no prophet, not narrator, and not scholar, and not like anyone come late or early. So no prophet supposed to reject or to say something against these two major principles, al-adl wa tawheed. Why? Because for them, these two principles universal. It's not about Islam. And I think from here we can understand the idea of tahsin and taqbih. So maybe for they consider something like hasan and qabih based on the idea of adl and tawheed. So tawheed is something like started with the humanity and also al-adl. So, and if these two principles ruin, the world will be ruined based on their doctrine. So any final question with 1 minute? Yes. And can you?
Is there any evidence that the Mu'tazila were influenced by the philosophers in the Greek translation movement, which was going on at the same time?
It's beyond my area. So just Firas asking me if Mu'tazila or do we have any influence from philosophy, Greek, and on this, because I speak about this, not I speak about kalam or anything else. There's something like different. But here, I don't see anything. So on that criterion. But this just opened for like thinking, but this beyond my area. Okay. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And thank you for coming.